Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Words of Heart. In today's episode, we have the privilege of speaking with Toby Patzman. I'm so sorry if I mispronounced your last name. Thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely. And nope, you got the last name spot on. So
Awesome. So, Toby, if you could tell my listeners a bit about yourself, that would be great.
absolutely. So I guess I could start off by saying I'm a neurophysiology researcher. I work with different kind of neurotechnologies. If anyone is familiar with an EEG, which is kind of like a swim cap looking thing with a bunch of electrodes that records the electrical activity of the brain. That is kind of uh, the technology that I'm most familiar with and got really excited about when I was introduced to it at my research lab at the University of Oregon. I was working at a research lab that utilized these EEGs, and I learned all about how to collect them and process the data, and just became like super fascinated with just kind of understanding the electrical and chemical activity that takes place in the brain that really results in kind of making us everything that we are and how we experience the world and the people around us, and is just everything. So that's kind of a little about me. Um, i i kind of went on from my research lab to a peak performance facility up in Washington, where I was working with a lot of like peak performers, like athletes, business people, high-end execs who were looking to kind of maximize their brain performance. And through the use of some of these different technologies that I've been using, you can actually enhance a variety of different aspects of cognition. So that's kind of a little about me.
Wow, that's really impressive. My brain is boggling with all those informations and neurons and cells and everything. You also mentioned earlier that you have a podcast as well. Do you incorporate your knowledge with your field of work into your podcast in any way?
That's a great question. The way I see my podcast is honestly like I definitely interview a lot of people that are in my sort of field of neuroscience. I would kind of call it like applied neuroscience. And yeah, I would not be able to have those conversations with the people, with the guests that I have on, if it weren't for me already having a lot of knowledge just in the field. So it's definitely the way I view my podcast as kind of like building off of what I've already spent several years working on and educating myself about. And I find the podcast a great opportunity for me to learn even more from people who know way more than I do about these different technologies. So to me, it's a win-win situation.
Interesting. So I do have one question. I don't know if how this question will formulate, but I'm going to give it a shot and ask anyway. Considering your field of work and the evolution of technology, do you have an idea of where you see technology and the brain, and where with your field of work, do you see that making massive improvements in the future, or do you already think it's making massive improvements?
Absolutely. I do see it as something that is going to revolutionize the field of kind of psychology, psychiatry. You know, we kind of live in a time where, psychiatry is really, it hasn't changed that much, over, the past, maybe century, as far as the kind of what happens if someone is dealing with some mental health problem. They may go to see a psychologist or psychiatrist, and they may get diagnosed with a certain disorder, and then it starts becoming a kind of a guessing game of which medication might work, and or which therapy might work. But a lot of people don't find success, and they've tried a handful of different medications or been going to a therapist for several years, maybe longer, and they're just not seeing results. And why is that? Well, in my opinion, I think that, without really taking a look at what's going on in the brain, it's just kind of a guessing game. There's a famous, very well-renowned psychiatrist named Dr. Daniel Amen, who runs the Amen clinics, and he talks about how psychiatrists are kind of the only doctors that don't actually look at the organ in which they're treating. In terms of, like, if you were to have an issue with your heart, your cardiologist wouldn't just ask you, like, so, how, like, is your heart just beating faster? Or, like, they would do a series of tests to actually measure the electrical activity of the heart, and, do maybe a stress test. Like, so why is it with, psychiatry or psychology that we don't examine the organ in which we're treating? So in my opinion, using these different technologies, such as uh, something called QEEG brain mapping, which is basically kind of an elaboration of the EEG technology, which I talked about. So basically, a computer kind of takes the information that's recorded and spits out these maps showing the electrical activity of the brain, and showing if it's too much activity, too little activity, and in what regions of the brain that's occurring. So a tool like that is, in my opinion, going to be huge in terms of the future of the field, in terms of just being able to take a look and see, we all have very different neurochemistry, and a technology like this can actually be able to help us see what is actually going on in the brain, and in order for us to be able to kind of treat the organ in which we're dealing with.
Well said. And I do have another question. I don't know how it applies, but since you're so well versed into the inner workings of the brain and your thoughts on technology in general, what are your thoughts on artificial intelligence?
That is a great question, and one in which I wish I had a more compelling answer to. I mean, I definitely do take a look at, like, what like Elon Musk is doing with Neuralink. I think it's super cool stuff. It's a bit different than the sort of neurotechnology that I'm more involved with, but I would not be at all surprised if artificial intelligence starts to kind of get integrated with the neurotech that I've been working with. But at the moment, I honestly am not the expert in that in any way.
No worries. I'm not the expert on it either. I'm just curious because many people have different like ideas and theories as to how artificial intelligence will play a role in our society, and plus there's like a millions of movies on it. So I'm really glad to hear your perspective, even if it's not a loaded perspective. That's the thing. It's an interesting topic to discuss. So.
Agreed.
So, I do have an icebreaker question for you. I don't know how I'm gonna phrase this icebreaker question for you because you understand the brain so well. So you may understand my whole logic behind this question before I even say it. But I'm gonna give it a shot though. If you could have any superpower that's not flying or or using your brain, what would it be?
I was just gonna say being able to read people's minds. I was gonna direct it in a brain oriented manner. Let's see. If I could have any superpower, I think it would be time travel. I think, you know,
Okay.
being able to, like, go, especially being able to go forward and seeing, it would be so interesting to see what's in all of our futures. Like, I think that would be fascinating to be able to and it actually kind of plays off your previous question about artificial intelligence. It's like, who knows if maybe we'll ever reach a point where we can, get these kind of like brain AI interfaces going, where we could actually, maybe be able to play around with like the time domain. Who knows? But yeah, I think I would choose time travel.
Interesting. Usually I would pick the answer that you suggested, which is three people's minds. That's usually my go-to answer, but I have a new go-to answer as far as a superpower. If I could have a superpower, it would be for my podcast to be heard across other galaxies that have yet to be discovered.
Ooh, that is a great one. Yeah. Where would you what like who would you get it in the hands of if you could?
I don't know. I guess NASA. I don't know how that would work. It would be like intergalactic broadcasting on a new level, I guess. Like
That'd be
something
pretty
off of
cool.
Star Wars or Star Trek or something. But yeah, I find that would be a really cool power to actually, or power or skill to actually be able to make that happen. Like somebody on Mars or Pluto could listen to this awesome conversation. So
That's a great answer. I like it.
well, Toby, we can keep this awesome conversation going until now to like 553, where probably robots and humans or robots part humans will be roaming the earth, but we don't have that time capability yet, but we will someday. Um, but we have to end this awesome conversation. Do you have any social plugins to tie into the show? Or we can do a mind meld, which also involves the mind.
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me on your show. I was really, honored to be a guest, and had a really great time talking with you. As far as social plugins, as far as like for my podcast, uh, I have an Instagram, or a podcast Instagram, which is Roscoe's Wetsuit Neuro. And you can also find the audio version of the podcast available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and just about any other major podcast platform. So the name of the podcast is Roscoe's Wetsuit Neuro. And I would encourage, anyone who found this conversation interesting, who wants to learn more about the way that the brain works, the way just technology and the brain are kind of shaping the future. I would strongly encourage you guys to go check out my podcast. But yeah, I would say go check us out there. And also, there's a YouTube channel, which is Roscoe's Wetsuit.
Awesome. So I do have another question before we wrap up. How did you come up with the name of your podcast?
That is a great question, and kind of it's a little bit of a long answer, but I'll try to distill it. Basically, the title Roscoe's Wetsuit, it's kind of a metaphor. Are you familiar with Childish Gambino?
Um, Kinda.
Kind of. He's one of my favorite artists, and he had an album called Because of the Internet, and there was a screenplay that went along with the album. In the screenplay, there was a character named the Boy, which basically he kept he kept like discovering the words Roscoe's Wetsuit written in different places, like it'd be graffitied under a bridge, or eventually at the end of the screenplay, he finds a kid who's like writing it on a napkin, and he goes up to the kid and like demands that an answer, like, what does this mean? What is Roscoe's Wetsuit? And the kid just responds, I don't know, I just saw it on the internet. So it's kind of like a joke in a way. So like Roscoe's Wetsuit means nothing, but it also means everything in terms of like the metaphor of kind of like I think a lot of the content on the internet is just kind of like, generic and people following the mainstream and what's cool. Whereas with my podcast, what I wanted to do was really just something really unique, and hopefully something that isn't just kind of following the pack. So that's kind of how I came up with the name. And I also thought in kind of naming my podcast that, it was actually, I thought it would make a great like icebreaker, just like um, this conversation question, because everyone, who isn't familiar, which is most people, there's only been like, I think I had like one podcast guest who was like, I understand, I know what Roscoe's wetsuit is. I was like, no way. But for most people, it's something that I have to like explain, and I think it just leads to a great kind of conversation. So yeah.
Well, I was really curious because it's not like a typical name, but I guess technically it's not really a name. It's just a play on words, just like in life.
Exactly.
Thank you again for joining me today, Toby. This was a wonderful conversation, and my brain is definitely stimulating from this conversation. So
Absolutely. And again, thank you so much for having me on. And I look forward to seeing the other amazing guests that you have on the show.
thank you. To all my listeners, stay healthy, stay safe, use your brain. Don't let your brain go to pasture in any form, whether it's through technology or entertainment. Use your brain, use it. And until next time, bye.